over the last 6 videos or so, we have been looking at the historical sections of the book of Daniel. And the thing that I want us to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is this. Whenever God confronts paganism, he wins. That there is nothing out there that can compare with our God. That's the story of the historical parts of the book of Daniel. Time and time again, the kingdom of the world has tried to come up against the kingdom of God. And time again, the kingdom of the world lost. And so today I'd like to move from the safety of recorded history to the precarious ledge of prophecy. Because Daniel makes a specific change in chapter 7. That he goes from talking about the historical aspects of what's happening in the land of Babylon and ultimately in Persia, and then now God is going to unfold for him and unveil for him some pretty amazing things. And so now I want to say that as I start this, that there is no uniformity among Christians and among Christian theologians and pastors and scholars concerning Daniel's chapter 7 to chapter 12. We have lots of incredible, good, fun conversations over coffee. And there are people who are smarter than me who don't agree with me, and I'm totally okay with that. So I'm going to make an argument that is consistent with my theology, and everybody does that. So this is not a litmus test for fellowship on how we understand the book of Daniel. Now, having said that, even though that there is a wide difference, if you will, on the specifics, there is a lot of there's a lot of agreement, how's that, on the overall application of these passages. And so even theologians who may differ on specifics in these books and in these passages, they will agree on the overarching principle that God is in control of human history. And so again, these are the things that make Christianity exciting. So now, so in this, as we look at Daniel's chapter 7 to 12, now first of all, I'm going to miss a lot of things because we just don't have time to unpack everything. And so if you want to have get more information you ever wanted to know on the book of Daniel, you can find them on the church website, fccefree.com, where I have sermons, I have other classes on that, and I go into much greater detail. So what I can do here. So I'm going to miss a lot. And again, I'm totally okay with that. So in chapter 7 of Daniel, we see, like I say, a major switch. And so next on Digging Deeper, we're going to take a look at Daniel's first dream. In Daniel chapter 7 to 12, we see Daniel's going to have a number of dreams. He's going to have a number of incredible experiences. And the first one is found in Daniel chapter 7. And now what we're going to see some similarities between Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 2. In fact, the ultimate interpretation of the dream is the same as the dream to Nebuchadnezzar, and we'll talk about why that's important here in just a few moments. So we begin in Daniel chapter 7, verses 1 through 8, as we take a look at Daniel's first dream, where it says this. It says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. And he wrote down the dream, and he told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. And then I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear, And it raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in his mouth between his teeth, and it was told, "Arise, devour much flesh." Then after this I looked, and behold another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And after this I saw in the night visions, and behold a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful, and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth, and it devoured, and it broke in pieces, and stamped what was left with his feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now I considered the horns, and behold, there came up from among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in his horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So Daniel has this dream, and he knows that there's something special about it. And I think in part of it, he must be wondering, I've kind of seen this before. Whereas Nebuchadnezzar had the dream of a statue, now Daniel's going to have a dream of beasts. But in this, we're going to see a little bit more information. And so one of the things that we know in Scripture is that God does not reveal everything to people all at one time. We call this progressive revelation, that God tells us more and more. So, for example, that Abraham knew more of the redemptive plan of God than Adam did. And of course, David knew more than Abraham. Isaiah knew more than David. And of course, we on this side of the cross, we know a lot more than any of them. Well, even with Daniel, even not only in the broad scheme of God working out his plan among people do we see this, but we also see this with Daniel. And we see this in the Gospels as well. The fact that Jesus was unveiling a little bit more and more about himself throughout the course of the Gospels, so that they would be able to understand, I guess, a little bit more of who he was. So by the time the book of Acts comes along, they have a much better Christology. So here we have 4 beasts. Now he says the first beast was a lion. Now again, if we go back to Daniel chapter 2 and we see again, though, that same progression of 4, we see the first beast, of course, was Babylon. Now remember that Daniel is seeing this vision in the first year of Belshazzar. So he's the last king who actually ruled in Babylon. Remember that he co-ruled with his father-in-law Nabonidus. And so while Nabonidus was away, fighting wars and going to the beach there and so on, that Belshazzar was left behind as regent in Babylon. And so it's at this time. So we're winding down on the Babylonian Empire. And I think that's what he sees when he sees that his wings were plucked. And it was like, that when you have a lion with wings and the wings are plucked, that means that, okay, nothing good's going to come after that. And so that first, the first beast was the kingdom, and that was Babylon. And then, of course, the second one we know is the bear. We know that would be Persia. That Cyrus came in and destroyed Babylon, and the Persians just kind of went through most of the known world, but they did it in kind of a plodding way. So the bear is a really good metaphor for the Persian Empire. That it was big, it was ungainly, it was powerful, and it just kind of steamrolled throughout the entire known world. And Persia reigned for several hundred years. And of course, we know that Persia had a big influence and a big impact on the children of Israel, because it was Cyrus who allowed them to go back into the land, and it was his decree that actually began the timing of the 70 weeks of Daniel. So which we'll get to later. So Persia has a big impact. And we're going to talk more about Persia in a later vision. But that's our second beast, is that second empire. Now the third one is the leopard, and that's Greece. And I want you to notice something there as you take a look at how the Bible describes Greece. First of all, it's a leopard. It's going to move very, very quickly. And of course, we know that Alexander, who was the Grecian Empire, basically, that he did move fast. He died in his 30s. That he didn't reign very long, but in his reign, he conquered everything. In fact, nothing could stop him. And Alexander's goal was to Hellenize, or to make Greeks out of the entire known world, and he did that. But there's something else here that Daniel is going to talk about that we're going to look at a little bit later. Because again, he's setting the stage for us so that we can understand what he's saying, and especially on this side of the cross, it makes it so much easier. But he talks about the fact that this leopard had 4 heads. And so what we're going to find is that there's going to be 4 kingdoms are going to arise from this one king, so from this leopard. So there's 4 heads, you're going to have 4 kingdoms come out of it, and we're going to talk about them when we get to chapter 11. And so whenever you see Greece, you see this concept of 4. And again, the reason for that is that when Alexander died, he had no legitimate heir. And so his kingdom was divided up by his 4 generals. And again, we'll talk about them when we get to them in chapter 11. And then we have the 4th beast. And again, in both of these visions, okay, in both of these dreams, in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, in chapter 2, and in Daniel's dream, we find this 4th beast, or this 4th kingdom is a terrible beast. And of course, this kingdom is Rome. And so, and he talks again about how horrible it is, and he talks about the fact that that there's going to be horns coming out of it, and there's going to be a little horn that's going to reign, and so all of the things he's setting up, he's giving us a foundation so that when we start to look at what happens, as Daniel's describing the events specifically around his 70th week, we'll have a good foundation. This is so that, but when Daniel gets there and he's looking at little horns, and he's looking at the Antichrist coming to power and so on, that he has a foundation from which to draw and from which to rest on. So God is setting the stage for him so that when he lays out for him some incredible history that hasn't been written yet, it hasn't even been lived out yet, that Daniel can kind of put the pieces together slowly, and it helps us as well. So now, again, this is the second time that we see a dream that deals with 4 kingdoms. And the reason that we do that is because, remember, in Hebrew, they don't have a lot of words. They don't have a lot of punctuation. They don't have any punctuation. And so if you want to highlight something, you repeat it. And so by God giving 2 dreams in Daniel, God is telling Daniel, this is important. You need to know this because this is going to be on the test. This is going to matter throughout all of human history. So what we find here that both of these dreams have in common is that each kingdom is more terrible than the one before. That each one seems to be stronger than the one before. Even though the 3rd kingdom doesn't last very long, it's still incredibly powerful. And each one of them will affect the entire known world. Now, again, we're not talking about China. We're not talking about Brazil and Australia. No, we're talking about the known world in which Daniel is speaking, and those who are going to be reading it. That they're going to affect everybody out there, and all of these kingdoms do. And they specifically, all of these kingdoms are going to affect what takes place in Israel. So we see God beginning this prophetic section with a dream of 4 kingdoms, but yet we also see some lessons from this. And we find this in verses 9 through 18, that we see that God is sovereign over all the kingdoms of the world. Now, I want you to notice the contrast between the kingdoms of the world and the Ancient of Days as I read this. Because people think that we have control over the world governments of the world, but in reality, God is the one in control. And I always find it fascinating how this is always, you ever notice we're always in the most important election of our lifetime? And just how much guilt is out there. If you don't do something, something's going to happen, as though we are the ones who are actually in charge. Now, I'm not saying that we don't take our civic responsibility seriously. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that God knows who's going to win the election before the person is even wins the primary. He knows who's going to be there, because all of the governments that we have, they are here for one thing, and that is to advance the kingdom and the program of God. And now we don't understand how that works, which is why it's so important that we do our civic duty, that we do our work and so on. But ultimately, we cannot frustrate the work of God in the world. He is going to accomplish that which he wants to accomplish. So with that in mind, let's take a look at this fourth kingdom in Daniel chapter 7, beginning verse 19. It says, "Now, then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and it devoured and it broke in pieces, and it stamped what was left with his feet. And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell. The horn that had eyes and a mouth and spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. And as I looked, this horn made war with the saints, and it prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came, and the judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. And thus he said, As for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the entire earth, and trample it down, and break it into pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. And he shall be different from the former ones, and he shall put down 3 kings, and he shall speak words against the Most High, and he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law. And they shall be given into his hand for a time, times and half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, and be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion, the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven, shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts are greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart." So what we find here in Daniel chapter 7 is that out of this fourth kingdom, there will come a king. There will come one king who will, first of all, wage war against the Most High. And he will make life rough for the saints, and he will have power for times, and half a time, or for 3.5 years. And he will ultimately be defeated by the Ancient of Days. Now, we're going to talk about this king again, but I want us to know, first of all, before we even begin here, I think that because Daniel's going to go into more detail about this king throughout the book, and he's going to talk more about this times, and half a time. So we're going to see more of this unveiled here, but I think that God kind of gives him this overarching view here so that he would know that God is going to be the one who wins in the end. So what we have here is that we have God laying out what's going to take place before Messiah comes down to reign. Again, this is the question that every Jew is asking. What point is Messiah going to come? This has been the promise of the prophets. This has been the promise all the way from Abraham through David. They are waiting for the king to come who's going to set things right. And so God is going to unveil for Daniel a little bit about the program, about how God is going to bring that about. But before he does that, he wants Daniel to know that he kind of wants to give him the end of the story before it begins. And the end of the story is that God wins. The end of the story is that all of the things that are happening in the world around him, that they are being done and they're being orchestrated by the creator of the universe. And so the question we ask ourselves is, why the dream? Because God wanted Daniel to know that even though Daniel was in captivity, that God was still in control. And I think that this is important because remember, the worst thing that you can do for a Jewish person in the Old Testament period is to kick them out of the land. In fact, that was what God told them when he laid out the covenant on Sinai. Is the fact that if you follow what I have to say, I'll bless your socks off. I'll bless you coming in. I'll bless you going out. I'll bless everything that you do. However, if you don't do what I call you to do, I am going to first of all bring pestilence upon you. I'm going to withhold the rain. I'm going to have other people come in and they're going to oppress you. And ultimately, if you get to the point when you are so disgusting before me, I'm going to kick you out of the land. And so for them to be out of the land of promise, that was the worst thing that could possibly happen. And so God, because he loves them, God gave them this incredible promise while Daniel was in captivity, while he was outside the land, while he was seen to be outside of the place of promise. That even though it seems as though God is far away, God is still in control. And we can trust him. So folks, what does that mean for us? Folks, right now, the kingdom of the world is having a pretty good day. That, our last election in America, we had the kingdom of the world going up against kingdom of the world, and guess what? The kingdom of the world won. So the kingdom of the world right now is feeling pretty good. I mean, there's different, just how bad is it on either side? Okay, we can argue that, but the point is that the kingdom of the world is gaining more and more footholds in the world today, as the church is actually losing some. We're losing influence. We've pretty much lost Europe. We've lost Canada. And we're rapidly giving away America. I say we haven't lost it. We've given them all away. We gave away Europe. We gave away Canada. We're in the process of giving away America right now. And so the kingdom of the world is getting stronger and stronger. And it may seem as though God is not in control. And it may seem as though things are spinning out of control. But I want to encourage you with this, folks. No matter what happens in the world around us, God is still the one who is orchestrating human history for his ends. Because God knows how it's going to end. God knows the beginning. He knows the ending. He knows where it's going to, where things are going to play out. And so all the things that people think that they've got this so smart, but in reality, they're simply pawns in the hands of the living God. And that, I think, is something that we can be encouraged by. And we can take the wins when we get them. So I'm not saying that. Enjoy the wins. I think that we got some wins recently. And I think that there are some good things that are probably going to happen in the next couple of years. But I also think that there's going to be more and more that's going to be helping, if you will, the Antichrist come to power as well in these next number of years. But again, the reason behind that is because God is the one who's orchestrating human history. So I pray that you're encouraged by these words today. I pray that you that you really take them to heart. And you realize the scripture says, some trust in horses, some trust in chariots. I will place my trust in the name of the Lord our God. That's what we need to do. And we need to choose this day whom we will serve, because the kingdom of the world is going to try to assimilate us in, and we need to be able to stand fast, just like Daniel did, just like Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael did. They were incredible examples for us. So I pray that as you gather with your siblings in Christ this week, that you have an incredible time in God's presence. And I look forward to seeing you again in a future video. God bless y'all.